go ahead and go right down the line, and have everybody here just state their name so you all know who's here with me today. Let me start with the left. Go ahead.
In Toronto, I'm chief of the BCI unit for the Attorney General's office.
Robert Lepre, Deputy Chief of Providence PD.
Alfredo Ruggiero Jr., Chief of Police, North Providence Police Department.
Kyle Rikas, Chief of Police, Narragansett Police Department.
Ryan Prest, Captain, Narragansett PD.
Kevin Bosquet, Captain, Narragansett PD.
Jim Baum, Deputy Chief, Rhode Island Attorney General's Office.
Jessica Valella, Special Assistant Attorney General for the Rhode Island Attorney General's Office.
And I want to extend a special welcome to Jacqueline McKenna, who's with us today as we discuss two cold cases that the cold case unit here has been assisting the Narragansett and North Providence Police Departments. These cases are not related other than in the sense that the finality that all of us in law enforcement hope to bring to victims has been long delayed, but we are delivering that finality today, a function of a team effort, certainly by the Narragansett and North Providence Police Departments, working sort of handed down from detective to detective, from administration to administration, and so really a big team, a broad team, a hardworking team, a committed team. And I see this as I am around the state and I run into retired detectives who approach me and will tell me about a case that they worked on. And there are others other than these that are in the pipeline that this team here at the office is working with on other cases. So it's a reminder to me, frankly, how much time can pass, as we're going to see today. A homicide, a murder that occurred in the 1980s and one that occurred in the mid-2000s. How much time can pass between families finding finality. So Jacqueline McKenna is the daughter of Cynthia McKenna. Again, grateful to have you with us today, Jacqueline. We have had contact and spoken with members of Debra Stone's family, and they are aware of what we have found and concluded, but they are not, they chose not to be with us today, but really glad for their support over the years. Before I turn it over to Jim Baum from the office, who will begin the presentation, and I'm going to step aside here. You know, as I read the reports, and I have very little involvement in the work. You know, my job here is to champion the unit, try to get them the resources that they need. Really grateful to Speaker Sicarci and the late Senate President for Dominic Ruggiero for his support for the positions that enabled us to found this unit a couple of years ago. So I don't spend a lot of time on a day-to-day basis the way these teams do and the other departments that are working with us. But when I read the reports, what I'm reminded is that the passage of time and the level of forensic detail and other investigative detail that you'll hear today can cause one to forget. And we really have to bring ourselves to remember, I think, sometimes, if we're not a family member, that Debra Stone and Cynthia McKenna, in the case of Cynthia, was a mother. They both were daughters, obviously. They had friends and family. And their deaths, even 30 or 40 years ago, in one instance, in Debra Stone's instance, that loss must continue to be felt very acutely today. So with that, I'm going to step aside and I'm going to turn things over to Jim Baum to begin the presentation. And thanks everyone for coming today. Excuse me.
Thank you, General. Good morning, everyone. So So on behalf of the Rhode Island Attorney General Cold Case Unit and North Providence Police and Narragansett Police, we are pleased to announce our investigative reports with respect to Debra Stone and Cynthia McKenna, where we conclude that Robert Jeremiah murdered Debra Stone on August 29th, 1984. Where we concluded that Robert Corey murdered Cynthia McKenna on or about February 19th, 2007. Unfortunately, both those subjects are deceased. We note that in the report. We're pleased to release these reports because we feel and hope that it just gives you a modicum of closure. It's the least we can do, and it's why we all do this at the Cold Case Unit and all our partners in law enforcement, and I'll get to this later, including our partners at Narragansett and North Providence, and the dedication that the detectives gave to the cases then and now. By way of background, I want to give you a little quick summary of what the Cold Case Unit does. We are a collection of pretty much like-minded people. We have experience pulling apart and putting back together difficult cases, and I think that we're a very, very good team. Our motto is assume nothing. So any case that we see and comes across our desk from law enforcement, we take it like we are investigating it and prosecuting it from the beginning. We take nothing for granted. For instance, if we're told in a report that the DNA samples or some swabs are extinguished and we can't use them anymore, we check that. We make sure that's true. And on a couple occasions, we found out that there were actually extracts and swabs. We assume nothing. We use traditional methods of investigation. We find witnesses, we find evidence. We try to find the police that worked on the case. We find professionals that worked on the case. This is very hard, especially in cases in the 1980s or 1990s where we don't have witnesses. We don't have police. It's important for us to then go back and corroborate that or generate new witness statements and new evidence. We also, and I know this seems obvious, we also try to find the evidence. A large part of our job is actually trying to find old evidence. Going through storage lockers, going through warehouses to try to find detectives' files, to try to find the full evidence that was seized at the scene. And I know Detective Wass can probably bore you for hours about the hoops that he had to go through to find the evidence in the Debra Stone case. We also use cutting-edge technology. So we use traditional DNA. We use traditional STR analysis, and we use laboratories that are on the cutting edge developing profiles. That's an important part of our role as cold case investigators, is to try to find an actual profile we can use. And that is very, very hard. That's why we have to find all the evidence to see if we can find a profile or a hit. Once we find a profile, we submit it to a lab, and then we wait a long time for that lab to do their DNA magic, and it comes back. If there's nothing, we find another piece of evidence. So we use traditional DNA. We also use forensic genealogy. Forensic genealogy was used in the Golden State Killer investigation. We actually went to a training and interviewed the genealogist Barbara Ann Ventnor. And she talked to us about what she does. It's literally building genealogy trees using an unknown profile from a crime scene and connecting it through open source law enforcement databases to see a connection, usually 4 or 5 generations away from where we're looking. We have a case actively right now that we are investigating where the genealogy and the tree has gone back to the 1600s. It's a long process, but we love it. It takes a lot of time. We also do hair analysis, same kind of hair analysis that's used in the Gilgo Beach case. We use MVAC, which is literally a DNA vacuum cleaner for pieces of evidence. We use trash pulls. We use handwriting analysis. We try to be as creative as possible. We partner with law enforcement that are working the case and throw ideas together as to how we can make the case better. So we find evidence and find people, and most importantly, we try to find DNA. Now we have 21 active cold case homicides that we're currently investigating. Of those, we have 3 active forensic genealogy cases. And like I said before, one of those goes back to the 1600s. We work with 13 local municipalities, the Rhode Island State Police and other municipalities across the state. Providence, Narragansett, Newport, Central Falls, North Providence, Johnston, Warwick. We also try to leverage our small unit's influence by partnering with federal agencies and other organizations. So we work closely with the FBI, the Rhode Island Department of Health. They are a huge partner in what we do. The Rhode Island Medical Examiner's Office, the Rhode Island State Crime Laboratory, the Connecticut State Crime Laboratory. We've worked with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police because we've traced in one of our cases the DNA trail to Nova Scotia in Canada. We work with Queensland, Australia, and their police department because we traced a DNA trail to Australia. We work very closely with the University of New Haven in their Institute of Forensic Science, the Providence Veterans Affairs Medical Center, the Rhode Island Department of Corrections, Massachusetts, Connecticut State Police, West Virginia State Police, Cold Case Foundation. We've even partnered with a former trial team member of the O.J. Simpson case, part of the prosecution team, and he was a valuable resource to us. We've also partnered with laboratories outside of our Department of Health. We work with Bodie, with Othram, Parabon, Astria, DLI, DNA Laboratories International, and of course handwriting experts. We applied for and got a very, very competitive grant through the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and we were awarded in October of 2024 $500,000 to be used over the next 3 years. That money largely is spent on this very expensive process of trying to get DNA profiles and then forensic genealogy. It also allowed us to leverage our office resources to fund a part-time position in the Department of Health. And Rachel Goodwin's here to get with us as part of the team. She is a part DOH and part Rhode Island Attorney General employee that assists with DNA case analysis. Very, very important. We have 2 prosecutors, myself and Jessica Villela. We have our chief of BCI, Ed Triano. We've got a deputy chief of the BCI, Michael Figueredo. He's a retired captain from Providence Police, and Ed is a retired agent from ATF. We have full-time investigators, Timothy McGann. He's retired detective sergeant from Providence Police. We have John McHale. He's a retired detective sergeant from Warwick PD, all experienced with putting together complex cases. We have with us today Teddy Michaels, retired from the Providence Police. He left our office, but he was very, very instrumental in the investigations of both these cases we'll talk about today. Also with years and years of experience. We have a part-time investigator, William Paiva. He's a sergeant from Jamestown Police. We use him. He's assigned to BCI, but again, we leverage our resources. We have our paralegal who holds us all together, Brianna Messa-Masronardi. She's here and she, again, holds us together. We have our research intelligence analyst that is assigned to the BCI, but we use her. We leverage our resources. And she's here today, Taylor McDermott. She's fantastic. We also took somebody from BCI who is a full-time BCI supervisor, and we sent her to be trained as a forensic investigative genetic genealogy at the University of New Haven. She got an advanced degree through this unit, and now she helps put together these genetic genealogy trees. Incredible, incredible asset. And we also have reached out to contract genealogists, Kimberly Bucklaw and Heather Lynch. And then, last but not least, we want to thank our victim services crew who have been with us from the beginning and assist us. We leverage their expertise in helping us and helping Jackie today. So with that, I want to turn to the homicide of Debra Stone. As I said, it took place in August 29th, 1984 in Narragansett, Rhode Island. Before I say that, I want to extend a big thank you to the Narragansett Police Department. Thanks to the original investigators, Detective Thomas Manjo, who could not be here today but wanted to. Detective Robert St. George, who is here with us today. They were the 2 main detectives at the time and did a lot of work in this case and did a lot of work for Debra. Detective Glenn Browning, Captain James Cook, and of course Detective James Wass, who is part of Narragansett today and really took all of the hard work of Manjo and St. George and brought this case back to life. Detective Wass worked with our unit and we interviewed over 32 witnesses and found and re-examined evidence. Debra Stone, she was 24 years old and she grew up in Rhode Island. She was from Providence and then Warwick. She got her GED in 1979 and was working in Providence at the time she was murdered by Robert Jeremiah. She was living at 200 Hoffman Street in Cranston near Garden City. Robert Jeremiah was known as Bobby Myers. Now, he was born in 1951. He died in 1995 at the age of 43. He lived at the time of the murder at Simmonsville Avenue Apartments in Johnston, Rhode Island. The investigation revealed that Mr. Jeremiah was known to the police. He had prior arrests for sales and possessions of narcotics, and he had a narcotics distribution operation. It was connected to New York City, and he did it along with a major informant that we'll talk about a little later. That major informant was part of the big reason that this case is here today. He lived at this Simmonsville Avenue Apartments in Johnston. There were two apartments, one owned by his sister and one owned by his mother, but he used both to deal drugs. September 2nd is when Debra Stone's body was found in Narragansett. It wasn't found by police. It was found by two juveniles who were out boating. They saw something floating in the water. They went to examine it, and they noticed that it was a body. So they called the Narragansett police. The Narragansett police arrived, and they found the location of the body was on the narrow river near the Narragansett and North Kingstown line, just north of the bridge on Middlebridge Road. It was pulled ashore, and they noted ultimately that Debra's body was wrapped in a floral sleeping bag, that sleeping bag was tied with a rope or a line, and it was anchored to a cinder block. And significantly, importantly to the detectives back then, there was one white work glove caught in the rope. Debra's body was brought to the medical examiner's office, and they conducted an autopsy the next day. And they ruled the cause of death to be asphyxiation due to strangulation. And they ruled the manner of death to be homicide. They noted a fracture of the hyoid bone with corresponding hemorrhaging of the strap muscles in her neck. Now, this is important, and it was important to the investigators that the hemorrhaging was consistent with strangulation, and the mark on the right side of her neck was consistent with strangulation. Later on, the cold case unit with Detective Wass resubmitted that autopsy to Dr. Alexander Cherkoff, and his findings corroborated the original medical examiner. They were consistent. There was significant force and fracture to the hyoid bone, according to Dr. Cherkoff. And important to this investigation, there was no evidence that Debra died of a drug overdose. Debra had a drug problem, and she used drugs. And she bought drugs at times from Robert Jeremiah. So there was that connection with Mr. Jeremiah. But the fact and the finding of the medical examiner that there was no drugs involved in her death is significant, because Mr. Jeremiah, as we'll get to later, told others, especially this major informant, that Debra died of a drug overdose. She did. She was killed by Robert Jeremiah. This is the glove that I talked about that was seized by the examiner's office. It was recovered in an important piece of evidence. Now, this major informant that I talked about was developed 2 years after, in 86. This informant worked for Robert Jeremiah in his drug distribution business, and, not surprisingly, had a number of run-ins with the law. His first run-in with the law caused him to tell the police that he had information about the homicide of Debra Stone and that Jeremiah did it. He said he was fearful of Jeremiah, as others in this investigation said they were fearful of Jeremiah. He said that he went to Robert Jeremiah's on Simmonsville Avenue on August 29 for drugs, and he saw Debra there on the bed. He left and then heard that Debra had died, and then he said to the police on the first meeting that a, quote, friend helped dispose of the body. That admission evolved. As any admission from somebody who has information, they don't give all the information the first time. So police kept at it. And every time he got arrested, they were there on him. Until finally, on the 5th time he was picked up, he gave it up, all of it, and said that the friend was a smokescreen. It was actually himself. He was still fearful of Robert Jeremiah, but he said that he went to that Simmonsville apartment on August 29th for drugs and saw Debra on the bed gagging, breathing funny. Now, this is consistent with what Dr. Cherkoff told us later, with somebody laboring under the influence of hemorrhaging of the hyoid bone. He said he left. He said that Jeremiah told him it was an overdose, and the next day Jeremiah showed up, August 30, to his apartment that he shared with his girlfriend, who was another informant in this case, and said that Debra had OD'd, we got a problem. I need you to come. So he went to Simmonsville, and he went to the apartment, and he saw in the bathtub the body of Debra Stone. He told the investigators that he was afraid of telling anybody because he thought that he could be held liable for the murder of Debra Stone, and he referenced John Belushi's death. Now, of course, we dug into that. And John Belushi's death, the woman who injected John Belushi with the lethal cocktail of drugs was prosecuted for his murder. So he knew that and said that in that statement. And by the way, was consistent when we found him again just recently. He said that he helped dispose of the body. He talked in his apartment about getting a sleeping bag, a clothesline. They bought gloves from a store. They then went back to the Simmonsville apartment and got Debra out of the tub and dragged her into the middle of the apartment. It's then he told the police that some white fluid escaped from Debra Stone's mouth. We learned later from our conversations with Dr. Cherkoff that that was consistent with decomposition. He said exactly where that fluid was on the carpet, and I'll get to it later, but he provided a map of where that fluid was. He went on to say that he and Jeremiah took Debra Stone's body, wrapped it in the clothesline that he got from the apartment, and that when Jeremiah tightened the clothesline, he tightened it so tight that it took one of his gloves, his white gloves, and it lodged in that clothesline. He was corroborated, not even knowing that the ME's office found that glove, he was corroborated in his rendition of that white glove. They said, and he said, that they waited until the nighttime to drive. They found and they thought that the Narragansett area was way out there and a good place to do this. They drove to the bridge and they disposed of Debra's body. They dumped it over the side. They used his 1975 Monte Carlo, Jeremiah's 1975 Monte Carlo, and she was in the back. Narragansett started their initial investigation and they interviewed witnesses. This is before the first major informant came, to get a timeline. Significantly, they found a close friend of Debra Stone. And that close friend was important because she was the last to speak to Debra. It was August 29th at 8 p.m., she said to the police, the very next day. She said she called Debra on the phone at around 8 and said that she asked her what she was doing. Debra told her that she had plans to see a male friend in Johnston to use drugs. And that she said to her, he arranged for a cab to bring her to the apartment. And Debra's last words to this friend were I'll meet you at my mom's house on Manton Avenue at 11 p.m. She never showed up at 11 p.m. This friend later learned, because she did some investigation after learning of Debra's death, that this male friend of Debra's was named Bobby Myers. And so she told the police that she heard that this male friend in Johnston was Bobby Myers. Narragansett took that name and went to Johnston and asked Johnston about Bobby Myers. This is where the name Robert Jeremiah came, because Johnston said, we're well aware of Mr. Myers. That's his nickname. His real name is Robert Jeremiah, and he's known to us for drugs. He lived between two apartments in Simmonsville Avenue. And Johnston took Narragansett to Simmonsville Avenue apartments that they knew of, and when they went there, Jeremiah could not be found. Police also corroborated this friend's story and that cab ride. What they did was they found all the cab companies at the time, and they found the Laurel Sweeney Cab Company and found the cabbie who actually took Debra Stone to Johnston. And that cabbie identified Debra Stone in a photo pack and said, yes, I dropped her off at around 9:45. That was significant because on September 6th, the Narragansett police finally caught up to Robert Jeremiah, albeit by phone, but they caught up to Robert Jeremiah and they interviewed him by phone. And Jeremiah admitted to the police that yes, he dropped Debra off at his apartment at Simmonsville Avenue on Wednesday, August 29th at or around 9:45 p.m. So she was dropped off at his apartment. He admitted that they went to the apartment, but not his mother's. He admitted that Debra tried to trade a black watch for drugs, and that he said to the police that he didn't have any drugs and told her he didn't have any drugs, and he got dressed and took her home to Garden City in that 1975 bronze Monte Carlo. He said that he dropped her off in Garden City, but that, and this was odd to the investigation, that Debra told him to drop him off a couple of blocks away, a little distance away from her apartment, which was strange to the investigation. He also said he dropped her off at 11 p.m., the very time that Debra said that she would meet her friend at her mom's house. He then concluded by saying, I dropped her off a short distance away. She probably left and got drugs. Now, this is important. His statement's important for many different reasons. The investigators found it, and we did too in our investigation. But it also corroborates this major informant that I told you about that was part of his drug distribution business. Because that informant said that after Debra's death, they were in New York and he saw Jeremiah sell a black man's watch in New York shortly after, corroborating his connection with Debra. This is a picture of Jeremiah's apartment at Simmonsville Avenue. Police went to that apartment later on and they searched for that carpet. Now they knew from the investigation and from the major informant that Jeremiah had cleaned that carpet after Debra's death. And they also knew during the investigation that apartment changed tenancy. So there was a new tenant and that tenant had cleaned the apartment. But they learned from the informant that carpet was there and that there was a stain in the carpet. And so they investigated the stain and the informant actually drew a map. I talked about the development of the informant, and by way of summary, he said he was at Jeremiah's apartment on the 29th. He said that Debra was motionless, later saying that she was gagging. He later tells police that he helped dispose of the body. It was wrapped in a sleeping bag, transported that body for ultimately dumping over the bridge. He also told police that he witnessed Jeremiah dispose of victims' belongings and sell her watch. This informant, I told you the statement evolved into the final form. We found him with Detective Wass in 2024, still alive, still willing to testify, still willing to cooperate. He had no connection to his former girlfriend at all at that time. He had no criminal charge at that time. He was an old man. And he said exactly what he told the police on that fifth time, that he saw Debra choking, gagging. It all tied into what he said before. Police then looked to the girlfriend, that the major informant's girlfriend. And she gave a statement back in 1986. And we interviewed her again and she was consistent. And what she told us then and what she told us now was that she believes Jeremiah did it. That Jeremiah showed up at their apartment with a problem, corroborating the major informant. That she helped get a clothesline. That people were frightened of Jeremiah, that he was an addict, he was paranoid and violent. Police also found a neighbor, and that neighbor was in the Simmonsville Village area, and that neighbor said that I saw Jeremiah's mother clean out the trunk of the car right after Debra's body was found. So I talked about the map that's drawn by the informant. That's a picture of the map drawn by this major informant, indicating the spot where Debra's body rested on the carpet after they pulled her out of the bathtub and where fluid escaped. And back then, the Narragansett police worked with state police to get a search warrant. They got a search warrant to go into that apartment. Again, it was rented by somebody totally different. It had been cleaned twice. But when they went in, they found that there was a stain on that carpet consistent with what we've learned, what the informant says, and consistent with decomp fluid, although it was never tested for decomp fluid. Here's a picture of the actual carpet and the hallway. That's the picture of the carpet where after it was cut out and the hallway before it was cut out. We spent a lot of time, Detective Wass and the cold case unit, trying to find that carpet. I told you we're trying to find evidence. It's difficult. We finally found the carpet and we looked at the carpet, and sure enough, there was stains consistent with what the informant told the police way back then and what he was telling us now. In '86, they observed the stain. In '86, they did no DNA testing because DNA wasn't a thing back then, right? In 2024, we saw the stain and we submitted that carpet for DNA testing. Now again, I told you about you submit something, you wait for the results. You submit, you wait. In this case, what we got back from this carpet was a partial DNA profile, but it was not enough for any interpretation. But we concluded it still showed and corroborated that major informant, who to us by this time was a credible witness. By 1991, this case had gone cold. Again, in 1995, Robert Jeremiah passed away. It's impossible to prosecute a dead person, and you cannot charge him. And in 91, Narragansett had this compelling statement from the first informant, the major informant. But it came with, at the time, significant challenges to his credibility. Now, he was corroborated in part by his girlfriend, the informant. He was corroborated by the information about the cabs. But back in 1986, they used polygraph examinations. And I don't know what weight they put on polygraph examinations back then. Now we can't use them. But they used a polygraph examination. And the major informant took that polygraph examination, the young major informant. He failed it. He failed on one question, and that question was whether or not you were present for the death of Debra Stone. Later, we talked to him, and he said that he was nervous because he didn't know if he actually was present for her death because she was gurgling, and she had those sounds coming from her. But at the time, a decision was made after he failed that polygraph exam to not use him as a witness. Now, we spent a significant amount of time trying to talk to old police officers who were working the case at the time, prosecutors who were working the case at the time, and we could not find a reason why we stopped using that major informant. And so there was no activity until Detective Wasp picked the case up. And we reached out to that major informant in 2024. The first thing he said to us when we went to his door was, "I've been waiting for you." So here's a general summary of the timeline of events. We have August 23rd, 24th. She's last seen alive by family and friends. Debra, at August 29th, 1984, she goes to Simmons Village, according to that close friend, on the cab and corroborated by the cab driver. August 30th, Debra observed motionless in Jeremiah's apartment. We know from our major informant she was gagging. The body was then discovered on September 2nd, 1984, in the Narrow River in Narragansett by juveniles. In 1986, the major informant was developed. He gives the interviews. The interviews evolve. He admits to his role in disposing Debra's body. Late 1986, cooperation ends because of a failed polygraph examination. The case is reopened in 2019 by Detective Wasp, who begins to contact old investigators. Detective Wasp then took the rope, the sleeping bag, and the glove to the Department of Health to try to connect Jeremiah to those pieces of evidence. Unfortunately, because of time, because of cleaning, there was nothing there DNA related to connect anyone. In 2023, Detective Wasp comes to us and we start our collaboration. And now you have a report. Both the informant and the informant's girlfriend are alive. And they both, like I said before, expressed their willingness to cooperate. They had no problems telling us what they remember. And they both were consistent and credible. They also don't know each other anymore. They're not in each other's lives. We put a lot of stock into that. We put a lot of stock into the credibility of that major informant. One of the things that we learned from this girlfriend of the major informant, in the report you'll see as a witness or an informant, is that she told us that the defendant confessed to her. Now, we summarize it was a confession, and obviously we're prosecutors. I would argue that he confessed, but it was. She said that shortly after Debra had died, she ran into Jeremiah. And she starts talking about Jeremiah about drugs, and she said that the way she was talking to Jeremiah must have indicated to him that I was nervous about Debra. So she said, Jeremiah said to her, "Oh, you know, don't you?" And the girlfriend said, "Well, I was able to piece it together with the clothesline and the sleeping bag and all that." And Jeremiah's response to her that she told us was, "Well, you know that she was stealing my dope." And she continued to say, "Well, you got to do what you got to do." And Jeremiah said, "Well, I had to." Two very, very compelling witnesses, corroborating each other, corroborated by evidence developed by the past detectives and by Detective Wasp. We took all of that and concluded that they were credible, that the test of time actually bows toward credibility, that had we have gone to trial, we would have placed both those witnesses on the stand. And because of that, we made the determination that they were credible witnesses, and their testimony was compelling. And it overwhelmingly supported the conclusion that Robert Jeremiah murdered Debra Stone in August of 1984. A brief note, we did talk about the major informant, and the major informant did help dispose of the body. And that is an offense. It was an offense back then. But the informant cannot be charged with that offense because the statute of limitations has run. The statute of limitations is 3 years. And obviously Jeremiah is deceased, and the case cannot be prosecuted. Move on to the next case. So, I want to recognize the assistance of North Providence Police and their investigators in this case. They were fantastic. They helped us throughout the entire investigation. I also want to recognize the determination of Jackie McKenna. She's Cynthia, well, she's Cindy's daughter. She was fantastic. She met with us. She met with North Providence Police. She didn't let it go. She knew she wanted closure for herself and her family. And she made this happen for her mom. She, and this is one of our first cases, she made it happen. Cynthia was a mother, a grandmother at the time of her death. She grew up in Cumberland, Rhode Island. At the time of her death, she lived at 242 Waterman Avenue in East Providence, where she was murdered in her own bed. She knew her killer, Robert Corey. She loved her killer. This is Robert Corey. He was born in 1962 and died in 2014. He was 52 years old. He died of congestive heart failure. It's unknown if he had a permanent address at the time. Little was known during the investigation back then in 2007, and we couldn't find much on Mr. Corey. He didn't have a permanent address at the time of the murder, but we knew that he served in the military. We also knew overwhelmingly that he was heavily involved with drugs. He also had a romantic relationship with Cynthia and other women. That other woman was a witness that was developed in this case, is now deceased. But he confessed to that other woman, and we'll get to that. This is 242 Waterman Avenue, apartment A9. This is where Cynthia lived, and this is the location of the homicide. Now, on February 21st, 2007, in the late afternoon, a relative did a well-being check and found Cynthia in her bed. He found pillows over her face and immediately was concerned because she wasn't moving, so he called the police. And North Providence Police arrived. When they arrived, they found Cynthia tucked into her bed. There were 2 pillows over her head. It looked like she had a broken nose. There was blood stains around her nose. There was a blue sock in her mouth, down her throat. There was tissues up her nose, and she was wearing only one blue sock. That matched. There was no signs of struggle in the apartment at all. The TV was on low. There was prepared food on in the kitchen. The door, no sign of forced entry. No sign of forced entry anywhere. It suggested to the investigation back then, and it suggested to our investigation, that this was done by someone who knew her. And what we learned through the investigation, and what they learned back then, was that Robert Corey was someone she loved and allowed him to come in. Left the door open for Corey. Corey had a key. No sign of forced entry. Cynthia's body was brought to the medical examiner's office on February 22nd, 2007. They found that her cause of death was asphyxia due to obstruction of the airway by a foreign object. There was a sock, again, shoved in the victim's mouth, occluding her airway. The tissues were inserted in both nostrils. There was a pillow placed over her face and head, and she was tucked tightly into the bed sheets, constraining her arms. They ruled that the cause of death, but they ruled the manner of death at the time undetermined. The North Providence Police didn't like that answer because it screamed that it was a homicide, and they kept up their investigation. Now, the ME's office did note that she had narcotics in her system, but significantly, they weren't at a lethal level. There was alcohol present, but again, not at a lethal level. They seized the sock and the tissues at the autopsy and later submitted them for DNA analysis. And there was not enough for comparison. We tried to test those things later on, the sock and the tissues. They had been degraded over the period of time. There was mold issues. There was nothing of value gained from them. The medical examiner's office took a sexual assault kit. That was done and submitted. No DNA found. Fingernails of Cynthia were taken and submitted, and only her DNA were found. North Providence began their investigation. They began to interview witnesses. They interviewed over 90 witnesses trying to track the timeline of Cynthia McKenna. And they found 2 witnesses that were of great significance. One is the former girlfriend, or the at the time girlfriend, of Robert Corey, and the other was a friend of Robert Corey's who was connected to the military, who was checking in. And what we learned in the investigation was on February 14th, 2007, Robert Corey checked into the Knights Inn in Seekonk, Massachusetts. We have receipts showing his check-in. The checkout time was February 21st. The girlfriend said after she was released from the ACI on the 15th of February to police that she went to the Knights Inn, and that's when she saw and joined Robert Corey. Robert Corey was in the middle of a drug bender at the time, and that he would come and go from the 15th on as he pleased, leaving her all alone. Enough time to leave that inn and go visit Cynthia. That witness said in her first arrest that she was scared of Corey and didn't want to share suspicions. She was arrested the second time and told you what I just told you. She remembers another witness who later provided a detail about Corey. That witness was the second witness that helped us, the friend of Corey's who was connected through the VA. That witness provided information that he checked in on Corey at the Knights Inn and confirmed that he was at the Knights Inn. And I'll get to what he said later, afterwards. February 18th, Cynthia is last seen alive by a neighbor. She's seen down in the parking lot arguing with somebody who was in a truck. The investigation concluded that that truck was not connected to Robert Corey in any way. February 19th, 2007, a visitor received an answer at the apartment. He went up to the door and tried to get into the door, asked for her, and then left. At the time, he said he was just checking in on Cynthia and that no one answered the door, and he left. We caught up with that witness and corroborated that he did the same thing. He was a friend of Cynthia's. He was not part of the investigation. February 19th, Corey is seen in the VA hospital by a witness. That same witness said that Corey on the 19th traveled to New Bedford, Massachusetts and checked into that VA hospital. February 21st, 2007, her body was discovered by a family member. Now, we wanted to focus on motive in this case. It was very important. And so North Providence and our unit with Detective Watts focused on Corey and Cynthia McKenna's relationship. And we learned from that informant that was connected, the close friend through the military, that he checked in on him at the inn, that Corey's nickname was Gunner, and that he talked about Corey and Cynthia's relationship as being very confrontational. That Corey was very angry about a domestic violence case that's noted on the screen. In 2005, domestic violence charges were filed in Providence Superior Court against Corey with Cynthia as a victim. Cynthia doesn't show to a trial, to a hearing, and so the case is dismissed. In 2007, there was hostility, and this witness confirmed the hostility. He was angry about that domestic violence case. He said that Cynthia loved Corey, but Corey used her to get prescription pills. He said that Corey owed a lot of money for those pills, and that Cynthia called and threatened him to tell his father and his ex-wife about the pills. Significantly, that witness told the police, and he told us when we found him, he corroborated and was consistent, that Corey told him before the murder, quote, "I wish the bitch was dead. I'd effing beat her face in." He said that after the death was announced in the paper, Robert Corey appeared at his residence, and he was in the middle of a mental breakdown. He was in a car. He took Corey to get medical help and went back to the car and found a woman's purse and a bottle of anisette. And the investigation showed, through talking with Jackie and talking with investigators, that Robert Corey never drank anisette. Anisette was Cynthia McKenna's favorite drink. Compelling evidence of a motive. State police developed an informant. They developed an informant who said that there was letters being sent to a relative at the ACI of Robert Corey. With this and through this informant, they intercepted 2 letters and 1 envelope. Now, those letters and envelope, and we'll get into this later, they were dated August and October 2007. It was months after the murder, and they were addressed, the return address was Bob Corey, and it had a New Bedford, VA address, Willis Street, the same address that he was associated with. And it was sent to a relative of Robert Corey's at the ACI. So what did the investigators do at the time? They took those letters and they took the envelope and tried to do something with them. And so they submitted the letters in 2008 to a Connecticut State Police crime analyst for a handwriting comparison. They were provided with handwriting exemplars to make the comparison. And the conclusion of the Connecticut State Police at the time was that it was, quote, probable that the samples and the letters shared common authorship. Right? That wasn't good enough for us. It wasn't good enough for the investigation. Now, in 2008, significantly, the North Providence Police lifted from the lick point of the envelope, they lifted a DNA profile. And they entered that full STR profile into the CODIS database, which is a combined DNA database of incarcerated persons, both state and federal. And at the time, in 2008, there was no match. There's never been a match to that in CODIS. And the reason we learned is that Robert Corey was never in that CODIS database, ever, up to the time of his death. Now, getting back to, a little out of order, but getting back to that second witness, the girlfriend of Robert Corey's at the time, I talked to you that early on that there was a confession. Now, when she went to the police, she told the police 2 times. The second time, she gave it all up to the police. And she confirmed that she was with him at the Night's Inn. And she told the police in that second interview that Corey was mad at Cynthia for lying about things and threatening to call relatives about money. And then she said that after the murder, she left the hospital and she saw Corey around town. And Corey, in response, called her. And on the phone call, Corey said to her, quote, right after the murder, "She'll never bother us again. She's all done." And Corey stated that he did her in. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us. She's deceased. Let's get back to that letter. That second letter that was sent in October was significant to the investigation then and significant to our investigation. It was a long letter. Again, return address Bob Corey, New Bedford return address. And some of the most important quotes and confessions in our view are these. "I have not been doing good at all since I did that to that crackhead." Quote, "I did not mean for her to die." Quote, "I wish I wouldn't have did what I did to her." Quote, "If she hadn't attempted to steal pills from me, it would not have happened." Quote, "I know North Providence would love to nail me, so I have to be careful." This is an important piece of evidence then, and a very important piece of evidence to our investigation. And so we wanted to try to connect that letter definitively to Robert Corey. So, how do we do that? We said, let's get that handwriting analysis redone. And we submitted that handwriting analysis, or the letters and the exemplars, to another handwriting expert. And we also said we wanted to get that DNA definitively linking Robert Corey. Problem though, Robert Corey died in 2014 and we're in 2024. So first, we sent handwriting exemplars to this handwriting expert. He's Michael Weldon, BDFE board certified. We did it back in January of 2025. It was tough finding handwriting exemplars. Again, this is the nature of these cold cases. You gotta dig through old veterans records, dig through old DMV records to find official documents that you can make the comparison. We found them. We submitted those with the 2 letters and the envelope. And the conclusion from this expert, who has been used in court many times by us and in other states, was, quote, "The letter dated 8/14/07, the front and back of the envelope postmarked August 14th, 07, and the letter dated 10/24/07 are the genuine writing of Mr. Robert Corey." That was great. we wanted more. And so we did it. We took that full DNA profile from the envelope and said, how do we connect that full DNA profile to Robert Corey when Robert Corey's dead? And we used YSTR comparisons. Now, each male has our set of chromosomes. Our Y chromosome is shared with our male family line. Your male family line in your Y chromosome is virtually identical. So we came together and talked about and strategized identifying a male relative of Robert Corey and conducting a trash pull from that relative. And we did that. We seized a bottle from the trash, took that bottle quickly to the Department of Health and got a profile to compare YSTR profiles. And the conclusion of the Department of Health was that the YSTR profile from the seal of the envelope is, quote, consistent with the YSTR profile from the trash item, indicating a specific familial relationship. We concluded that this was Robert Corey's DNA on that envelope. We concluded that Robert Corey wrote that letter to his relative definitively. We concluded that Robert Corey confessed to this relative to killing Cynthia McKenna. All of this evidence was put together. The statements of the past witnesses, the confessions, and primarily the DNA evidence, and led us to the conclusion that Robert Corey murdered Cynthia McKenna before or around 10:30 p.m. on February 18th, but before the evening of February 19th. There was motive. He was angry over things that Cynthia were perceived to be doing to him. He had the opportunity. He didn't need a key. She loved him. He had easy access. And we got him in the confessions. And so we concluded that he killed Cynthia McKenna. Now, at this time, I would like to invite Detective James Wass from Narragansett Police Department, our key partner in the Debra Stone investigation, to share a few words.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Detective James Wass of the Narragansett Police Department. First and foremost, I want to extend my sincere gratitude to the Stone family for their invaluable assistance throughout this investigation. Their cooperation and information they provided greatly contributed to bringing clarity to this case. 41 years is a long time to have to wait for answers, and I truly hope that this outcome offers the Stone family a sense of closure. I'd also like to thank the Rhode Island Attorney General's Office Cold Case Unit for their ongoing partnership and support. From the digital conversion of historical records, assistance with interviews, and funding of forensic testing, their dedication and resources were instrumental in moving this case forward. Lastly, I want to recognize the original investigators from the Narragansett Police Department, namely Captain James Cook, Detective Glenn Browning, Detective Thomas Monjo, and Detective Robert St. George, who's here with us today. They laid the foundation for this case, and their diligent and thorough investigative work, although limited by the technology available to them at the time, their commitment and professionalism were critical to the progress and eventual resolution of this investigation. This outcome would not have been possible without their efforts. I want to thank them and thank you.
I'd like to invite Chief Alfredo Ruggiero from the North Providence Police Department.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning. This case represents the best of our collaborative investigative efforts with the Attorney General's Cold Case Unit. Using the latest forensic technology, our team has finally found answers for Cynthia's family. I am thankful for the hard work of our detectives, as well as the Attorney General's Office, for their guidance and their resources throughout this investigation. Thank you.
This time I'd like to call up Jackie McKenna. Jackie was a true partner to the Cold Case Unit. She helped us immensely, and if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't have the energy to do what we did. So Jackie?
For 18 years, 8 months, and 9 days, I have mourned my mother, Cindy. And although my journey for justice may have wavered, it never stopped. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s principles of nonviolence state that the universe is on the side of justice. Today we see that to its truth. Today there is accountability, and today we begin to heal. Family and friends of Cynthia McKenna would like to sincerely thank the collaborative efforts of the North Providence Police Department and Attorney General's Cold Case Unit for providing us with long-awaited answers. A mother of 3 and a grandmother of 1, she deserved better. Her absence has always been magnified during the major milestones in my life, but it's in the small day-to-day moments where all is quiet that I miss her the most. The late night phone calls, her always wanting just one more hug, packing me a brown bag lunch with my name on it for a big meeting at work, wearing our sunglasses at night to go grocery shopping, feeding the ducks at her favorite park, sneaking a Werther's original from her pocketbook, sorting through her collection of coupons and rain checks, going to Friendly's for birthday breakfast ice cream, enjoying Willow Tree chicken salad with Autocrat coffee milk, extra ice cubes, and receiving her cards for every occasion. P.S. I love you. Birthday candle and falling star wishes can now be for something other than the truth. This is the end of the criminal investigation, not the end of her memory. I will continue to do advocacy in her honor. Domestic violence victims should never be silenced. My heart is not suddenly mended. The truth does not magically bring her back. I will forever grieve her loss. Her life mattered and always will. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. This time I open it up to questions. Amanda?
Jim, one thing that struck me as you were describing all of the work that the unit and law enforcement put into these is how they kind of knew from the beginning who the suspects were, but couldn't yet prove it. It sounds like they left a great roadmap. What is it that was missing back then? Was it just simply the technology didn't exist at the time?
I think with the Debra Stone case, it really was a lack of confidence in that major informant. Because I think he was a lot younger, and having dealt with people that you try to use that are less than savory to help your case, at the time they must have made the call that he wasn't a credible person to put on the stand. I think time really did add to his credibility. He was consistent, he wanted to cooperate. I've been waiting for you, the first thing. So I think that was a huge thing, because there wasn't much in that case. We tried DNA. We didn't get the responses that we wanted to do with DNA. It was all about the witnesses and the corroboration of the testimony. With respect to Cynthia's case, it was absolutely the DNA. We wanted to definitively prove that Robert Corey sent that letter. That letter was a key piece of evidence. So we wanted to definitively prove that through DNA, and we did. Yeah.
Can you talk about some of the other cases that you're working on, like what else is in the pipeline, and sort of give us the size and scope of what's on your plate right now?
So as I said before, we have 14 cases kind of active, 21, 14 really active. We have those 3 forensic genealogy cases. I don't want to get into specifics about these cases, but it's all over the map as far as where we are in different stages. Some we're gathering the evidence, and that's a tough task on some of these cases. I can tell you that we have one case where we don't have a detective's file. So we have to literally try to find the people that may have been around this individual and talk to them like we were back in the day. We have other forensic genealogy cases where we're just waiting for that forensic genealogy hit. Like I told you, we're chasing these DNA trails from Nova Scotia to Queensland, Australia. We have one that's, it's boggling our minds how connected this area is in the 1600s and moving through that genetic connection. So yeah, I can't really give specifics, but it's all over the map. It really is. And you know, we are, from the beginning, it's all about collaboration. So any law enforcement agency that wants to come with a case like we did with with the Narragansett case, we take these old cases, we scan every bit of evidence into the computer, so now we've got a legitimate file that will last the test of time. We're open for business.
I guess kind of piggybacking off the active case, I know you can't divulge too much, but what are the demographics looking like with these cases? Is it more women than men, or specific ethnicities?
I would say that more women than men, and it ranges across the ethnicities. Cold cases does not discriminate. Any more questions? Great.
Well done.
Thank you very much, everyone.